In the spring of 1983, a Soviet nuclear submarine captain was ordered to take his boat to sea. He refused. The submarine was still in the middle of repairs. His crew was on leave. The boat's systems were not properly configured. Nuclear weapons were still aboard. Taking the submarine to sea in this condition was, in the captain's professional judgment, suicidal. His superior officer, a rear admiral, responded by threatening to revoke the captain's Communist Party membership. Without party membership, a Soviet officer could not command a warship. His career would be over. His family would suffer. The captain went to sea. On the very first dive, the submarine flooded. 16 men died. The submarine sank to the bottom of a shallow bay on the Kamchatka Peninsula. And then, 2 years later, after 300 million rubles in repairs, the same submarine sank again, at the dock. This is the story of K-429, the only submarine in history to sink twice. It is not a story about bad luck. It is a story about a system that valued obedience over survival, quotas over safety, and political loyalty over the lives of the men it sent to sea. This is naval depth. K-429 was a Project 670A submarine, known to NATO as the Charlie 1 class. She was a nuclear-powered cruise missile submarine designed to approach American carrier battle groups and fire anti-ship missiles from underwater. She was built at the Krasnoye Sormovo shipyard in Gorky and entered service with the Soviet Pacific Fleet in September 1972, homeported at the naval base in Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky on the Kamchatka Peninsula. By 1983, K-429 had served for 11 years. She was not old by submarine standards, but she needed maintenance. After a long patrol, she returned to base in early 1983 and entered the shipyard for an extensive overhaul. Her crew was given leave and dispersed. The submarine was turned over to shipyard workers for repairs. Nuclear-armed cruise missiles and torpedoes remained aboard the submarine throughout the overhaul. This was standard Soviet practice. Removing nuclear weapons from a submarine required extensive paperwork, security protocols, and specialized handling equipment. It was easier to leave them aboard. The timing of the overhaul coincided with one of the most dangerous periods of the Cold War. In March 1983, President Ronald Reagan delivered his famous Evil Empire speech, publicly characterizing the Soviet Union in the harshest terms. American military forces were conducting aggressive exercises along Soviet borders. In April, the United States Navy launched Fleetex 83, a massive exercise in the North Pacific that included multiple carrier battle groups and dozens of submarines. At one point during the exercise, American aircraft flew over Soviet territory in the Kuril Islands, testing Soviet air defenses and demonstrating the vulnerability of Soviet military installations. The Soviet leadership was alarmed. Moscow issued directives to all military branches emphasizing rapid combat readiness. The Pacific Fleet received orders to maximize the number of operational submarines. Boats in overhaul were to be returned to service as quickly as possible. K-429 was not ready. Her overhaul was incomplete. Critical systems had not been properly tested. The ventilation system had been left in an open configuration by the shipyard workers. Instrumentation was not aligned. The ballast tank indicators were not calibrated. None of this mattered to Rear Admiral Oleg Yerofeyev, who ordered Captain First Rank Nikolai Suvorov to reassume command of K-429 and take her to sea for exercises. Suvorov objected. He listed the reasons the submarine was not ready. The overhaul was incomplete. His crew was on leave and could not be contacted. The boat's systems were not configured for sea. Standard operating procedures required extensive pre-deployment inspections that had not been conducted. Yerofeyev's response was simple and brutal. He told Suvorov that questioning the order would result in the revocation of his Communist Party membership, followed by a military tribunal. In the Soviet system, this was not merely a career threat. It was an existential one. Without party membership, Suvorov would lose his command, his rank, his housing, and his family's access to basic services. He would be finished. Suvorov went to sea. He tried to reassemble his crew, but many could not be reached. Their places were filled with sailors from the naval base and from 5 other submarines that happened to be in port. By the time K-429 was ready to depart, she carried 120 men, including 2 captains. Nearly 1/3 of the crew had never set foot on K-429 before. None of them received any training specific to her systems. This crew, assembled from 6 different submarines, with no familiarity with each other or the boat, was about to take a nuclear submarine with incomplete repairs and uncalibrated instruments to sea. On the evening of June 23, 1983, K-429 arrived at her testing area in Serenaya Bay, just south of Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. The water depth in the bay was approximately 40 meters, roughly 130 feet. This was extremely shallow for a submarine test dive, but Suvorov had insisted on conducting the initial dive in shallow water rather than proceeding to deeper areas. This decision, born of caution, would save the lives of most of his crew. Suvorov ordered a dive to periscope depth, but he made one critical error in the rush. He did not give the preliminary command to set the diving watch. The crew did not align the submarine systems for diving. They were not at their proper stations. When the ballast tanks began filling, the indicators showed them as empty. The instruments had not been calibrated after the overhaul. The crew, unfamiliar with K-429's specific systems, did not recognize the discrepancy. The submarine began to descend much faster than expected. Then the ventilation system, which the shipyard workers had left locked in the open position, allowed seawater to flood one of the forward compartments. The flooding was immediate and catastrophic. 420 tons of water poured into the submarine in seconds. 16 men in the flooded compartments died almost instantly. They had no warning, no time to close hatches, no time to reach escape equipment. They drowned in the dark in a submarine that should never have been at sea. K-429 struck the bottom of Serenaya Bay at a depth of 40 meters. She was on the ocean floor, but she was not in deep water. If Suvorov had followed the Admiral's original order and proceeded directly to the torpedo firing range in deeper water, the submarine would have sunk to a depth of over 400 meters. At that depth, the hull would have imploded. Everyone aboard would have died. But they were in 40 meters of water. The surviving 104 men had a chance. Suvorov's first thought was to signal for help. But the submarine's emergency position indicating radio beacon could not be launched. The escape capsules and emergency buoys had been welded to the hull. In the Soviet Navy, losing an emergency buoy at sea was considered a serious offense. Buoys were expensive. Officers who lost them were punished, so the shipyard had welded them in place to prevent accidental release. This meant that a device designed to save the crew's lives in an emergency had been permanently disabled to protect the shipyard's equipment budget. K-429 was on the bottom with no way to communicate with the surface. Suvorov assumed that his report of intending to conduct a test dive had been received by the base, and that when he failed to report resurfacing, the duty officer would raise the alarm within about an hour. He was wrong. No alarm was raised for hours. The naval base did not notice that K-429 had failed to check in. The duty officers either did not receive the report or did not act on it. The 104 survivors sat on the bottom of Serenaya Bay in a damaged nuclear submarine, breathing increasingly toxic air, waiting for help that was not coming. The submarine's battery, damaged by the flooding, began releasing hydrogen gas. Hydrogen is explosive. In a sealed submarine compartment with no ventilation, hydrogen buildup can reach explosive concentrations within hours. The survivors knew they were breathing poison and sitting next to a potential bomb. After several hours with no sign of rescue, Suvorov made a decision. He called for volunteers to attempt an escape through the torpedo tubes. 2 of his original crew members, men who had served on K-429 before and knew her systems, volunteered. They donned escape breathing apparatus, entered the forward torpedo room, flooded the escape trunk, and swam out through the torpedo tubes into the freezing water of Serenaya Bay. They surfaced and looked around. There were no ships in sight, no rescue vessels, no helicopters. The Soviet Navy had not noticed that one of its nuclear submarines was missing. The 2 sailors swam to shore. When they reached land, they were arrested by military police. Eventually, their report reached Admiral Yerofeyev at approximately noon the following day, nearly 12 hours after the submarine had sunk. By 7:15 that evening, the submarine had been located. The first surviving crew member reached the rescue ships at 10:36 that night. Over the following hours, the remaining survivors were evacuated. 104 men survived, 16 were dead. The aftermath was as Soviet as the disaster itself. 3 months after the sinking, Captain Suvorov and one of his compartment chiefs were arrested. They were tried and convicted of violating fleet regulations. Suvorov received a 10-year prison sentence. He served 3 years before being released. The admiral who had ordered an unfit submarine to sea with an unqualified crew was not punished. The shipyard workers who had left the ventilation system open, welded the emergency buoys shut, and failed to calibrate the instruments were not charged. The system that had created the conditions for the disaster was not reformed. The Soviet public learned nothing. The sinking of K-429 was classified. The families of the 16 dead men were told their relatives had died in a training accident. The original crew of K-429, the men who had been on leave when their submarine was sent to sea with strangers, only learned what had happened when they returned to port and found their submarine missing. K-429 was raised from the bottom of Serenaya Bay. The Soviet Navy invested approximately 300 million rubles in repairing and restoring the submarine. The work took 2 years. By mid-1985, the submarine was approximately 80% restored. On September 13, 1985, K-429 sank again. She was moored at the repair dock. Workers had been conducting repairs on her internal systems. Through negligence, a valve was left open or improperly secured. Water flooded a compartment. The submarine settled to the bottom at the pier. At least 1 crew member died in the second sinking. Some sources report up to 4 fatalities. K-429 was raised again, but this time the Soviet Navy had had enough. The submarine was decommissioned and converted into a stationary training hulk. She never went to sea again. She was eventually scrapped in the 1990s along with her sister ships. The story of K-429 is absurd, a submarine that sank twice. A captain punished for obeying an order he tried to refuse. Emergency equipment welded shut to avoid paperwork. A nuclear submarine sent to sea with a crew that had never trained together and instruments that did not work. But the absurdity is not an accident. It is a product of a system that prioritized obedience over competence, appearances over reality, and political loyalty over human life. The Soviet Navy was not unique in this regard. The entire Soviet military system operated on the same principles. Officers who reported problems were punished. Officers who concealed problems were promoted. The result was a military that looked formidable on paper but was rotting from within. K-429 was not the only Soviet submarine to sink during the Cold War. The Soviet Union lost at least 7 nuclear submarines to accidents between 1960 and 1989. Hundreds of Soviet sailors died in submarine accidents during this period. In almost every case, the pattern was the same. Maintenance was deferred. Safety procedures were ignored. Officers who raised concerns were silenced. And when the inevitable disaster occurred, the blame fell on the lowest-ranking person available. Captain Suvorov followed procedures that saved the lives of 104 men. He insisted on conducting the test dive in shallow water when his superior wanted him to go directly to deep water. He organized the torpedo tube escape that brought help. He maintained discipline and order on a sinking submarine with a crew that barely knew each other. For this, he was sent to prison. The ocean does not care about rank or politics. It does not respond to threats or orders. It simply finds the weakness in the hull, the gap in the maintenance, the valve that was left open, and when it finds that weakness, it comes in. K-429 found her weaknesses twice, and twice the ocean came in. The submarine sank because the system that built her, maintained her, and sent her to sea was more afraid of its own admirals than it was of the ocean. That is not a navy. That is a bureaucracy with weapons. This is Naval Depth. Subscribe and stay with us as this story continues.